She was only 6 years old. She didn't know what the word mafia meant. All she knew was that her mother had been lying in bed for days, too weak to even stand. So the little girl did something simple. She took her mother's phone, snapped a picture of her sick mum, and sent it to the last number that had called. She thought she was asking for help, but the message didn't reach a doctor. It reached one of the most feared Korean mafia bosses in the city, and when he saw the photo, he immediately stood up, because the woman in that picture was someone he thought had disappeared from his life forever. Before we continue this unbelievable story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy emotional and mysterious stories like this. We share powerful stories about unexpected moments that changed lives forever. And I'm curious about something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your country and the current time in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Now let's go back to the moment everything began. The moment a 6-year-old girl accidentally sent a message that would start a chain of events no one could have predicted. The small apartment was quiet, except for the soft ticking of an old wall clock. 6-year-old Mina sat on the floor beside the bed, carefully coloring inside the lines of a drawing she had started earlier that morning. The picture showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. But every few seconds, Mina would stop coloring and look up at the woman lying on the bed, her mother. "Hannah, Mummy," she whispered softly. The woman didn't respond. Hannah had been sick for days now. At first, she told Mina it was just a cold. She tried to smile, tried to cook breakfast like she always did, tried to act like everything was normal. But Mina had noticed the truth. Her mother was getting weaker. The tiny apartment, once filled with the smell of warm soup and laughter, now felt heavy and quiet. Medicine bottles sat on the small table beside the bed. A glass of water remained untouched. Mina stood up slowly and walked closer. Her mother's breathing sounded tired. "Mummy, are you sleeping again?" Mina asked. Hannah's eyes opened slightly, her face pale but gentle. Even in her weakness, she tried to smile for her daughter. "I'm okay, sweetheart," she whispered. But Mina could see the truth in her eyes. Adults always said children didn't understand things, but Mina understood enough. She knew the fridge had less food now. She knew her mother stopped going to work weeks ago, and she knew something was very wrong. Mina climbed onto the bed carefully and sat beside her mother, holding her hand with both of her tiny hands. Her mother's hand felt colder than usual. "Mina," Hannah murmured weakly. "Yes, Mommy. If anything ever happens, be brave, okay?" Mina frowned. "Nothing will happen," she said quickly, shaking her head. "You just need medicine." Anna closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. Then she whispered a name so softly Mina almost didn't hear it. "Jaemin." Mina tilted her head. She had heard that name before. Sometimes when her mother thought Mina was asleep, she would whisper that same name while looking at an old photo hidden inside a drawer. But whenever Mina asked who Jaemin was, her mother would simply smile sadly and say, "Someone from a long time ago." Mina didn't understand why thinking about that name always made her mother look both happy and hurt at the same time. Suddenly, Hannah began coughing weakly. Mina's heart jumped. "Mommy," she said, rushing to grab the glass of water beside the bed. But Hannah's hands were shaking too much to hold it. The little girl stood there frightened, not knowing what to do. The room felt smaller. The silence felt heavier. Mina looked around the apartment, hoping to find something, anything, that could help. That's when she noticed her mother's phone lying on the bedside table. The screen suddenly lit up. A call had come earlier, and the number was still there on the screen. Mina stared at it for a moment. Then, a small idea formed in her mind. Maybe, just maybe, whoever called that number could help her mummy. Mina stared at the glowing screen of her mother's phone. The number was still there in the call history. She didn't recognize it, but in her 6-year-old mind, it didn't matter. Adults called each other when they needed something important. Maybe the person who called earlier knew how to help. Maybe it was a doctor. Maybe it was someone who could make her mummy better. Behind her, Hannah's breathing had grown heavier. "Mina," her mother whispered weakly. "I'm here, Mummy," Mina said quickly, turning around. Hannah tried to sit up, but the effort made her cough again. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the bedside table, but she didn't have the strength to grab the phone. "It's okay," Mina said softly, trying to sound brave. "I'll help." The little girl picked up the phone carefully with both hands. She had seen her mother use it many times before. She knew how to unlock it because Hannah never hid the passcode from her. Her tiny fingers tapped slowly on the screen until the phone opened. The call log appeared. The same unfamiliar number sat at the top. Mina hesitated. "What if they don't answer?" she whispered to herself. Then she remembered something her teacher once said. "If you need help, you should ask for it." Her eyes moved toward her mother lying weakly on the bed. An idea came to her. Instead of calling, maybe she could show them what was wrong. Mina tapped the camera icon. The phone felt heavy in her small hands as she pointed it toward the bed. "Mommy, stay there," she said quietly. Hannah barely moved. The little girl took a picture. The photo showed her mother pale and exhausted, surrounded by medicine bottles and crumpled blankets. Mina looked at the picture for a moment. Her chest tightened. She didn't like seeing her mother like that, but if someone saw the photo, maybe they would understand how serious it was. Mina opened the messages and pressed the number from the call log. Her fingers slowly typed the words she knew how to spell. "Please help my mummy." She looked at the message again to make sure it was right. Then she added the photo. For a moment, Mina stared at the send button. She had no idea who the message was going to. She didn't know that the number belonged to one of the most powerful and feared Korean Mafia bosses in the entire city. To her, it was just a number, just someone who might help. So the 6-year-old girl took a small breath and pressed send. Within seconds, the message traveled across the city, straight to a man who hadn't thought about the past in years. And the moment he opened that message, everything began to change. Across the city, far away from the quiet apartment where Mina waited beside her mother, the atmosphere was completely different. The top floor of a tall glass building overlooked the glowing lights of the city. Inside, a group of men sat around a long black table, their faces serious. At the head of the table sat Jamin. In the criminal world, his name carried weight. People whispered it with fear. Some called him a businessman. Others called him something far more dangerous. But everyone knew one thing. Jamin was a man who never showed emotion. He leaned back in his chair, listening quietly as one of his men spoke about a rival group trying to move into their territory. We should deal with them tonight, the man said firmly. Another nodded. If we wait, they'll think we're weak. Jamin didn't answer immediately. His sharp eyes moved slowly around the room as if measuring every word. The silence made the other men uneasy. Then suddenly, buzz. His phone vibrated on the table. Normally, he would ignore it during meetings, but the vibration continued. Once, twice, 3 times. Jamin frowned slightly and picked it up. It's probably nothing, one of the men muttered. Jamin unlocked the phone. A message notification appeared from an unknown number. Attached to it was a photo and a short message. Please help my mummy. Jamin's expression didn't change at first, but the moment he opened the photo, everything inside him froze. The room fell silent. The men around the table exchanged confused glances as they watched their boss stare at his phone. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then slowly, Jamin stood up. His chair slid back against the floor with a sharp sound. Boss? One of the men asked cautiously. Jamin didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the photo. A woman lying weakly in bed, her face pale, her body surrounded by medicine bottles. But it wasn't the illness that shocked him. It was her face. Because the woman in the photo was someone he knew better than anyone. Someone he had searched for years ago. Someone who had vanished without a trace. Hannah, he whispered under his breath. 5 years. 5 long years since she disappeared from his life. And now, a message about her had appeared on his phone. But something else caught his attention. At the edge of the photo, barely visible, was a small hand resting on the bed, a child's hand. Jamin's jaw tightened, his mind filled with questions. Who sent this message? Why now? And most importantly, why was Hannah suddenly asking for help? Without another word, Jamin grabbed his coat. The men in the room watched in shock, because the calm and untouchable Mafia boss they knew had suddenly become a man racing against time. The room remained silent long after Jamin pushed his chair back. His men watched as he grabbed his coat and walked quickly toward the door. Boss, what's going on? One of them asked cautiously. Jamin stopped for only a second. His voice was calm, but there was a sharp urgency in it they had never heard before. Find the location of this number, he said, holding up his phone. One of the men immediately stood and took the device. Yes, boss. Within seconds, fingers were flying across a laptop keyboard. Jamin stood beside the window, staring out at the glowing city lights, his jaw tight. 5 years. For 5 years he had searched for Hannah. At first, he used every connection he had, private investigators, police contacts, even people in the underground world. But it was like she had vanished from the earth. No trace, no explanation, nothing. Eventually, everyone told him the same thing. She probably left the country. Maybe she wanted to start a new life. But Jamin never believed that. Hannah wasn't the type to disappear without saying goodbye. Something had always felt wrong. Now suddenly, she appeared again, and she looked dangerously ill. Boss, the man at the laptop said quickly, we found it. Jamin turned immediately. The phone signal is active. It's coming from a residential area on the east side of the city. He gave the exact address. Jamin didn't hesitate. Prepare the car. The men exchanged glances. They had seen their boss deal with rival gangs, corrupt businessmen, and dangerous negotiations without the slightest emotion. But tonight was different. Something about that message had shaken him. Within minutes, several black cars pulled out of the underground parking garage. The city lights blurred past as they sped through the streets. Inside the car, Jamin sat silently in the back seat, staring at the photo on his phone again. Hannah looked thinner than he remembered, weaker. The vibrant woman he once knew looked like she had been fighting something alone for far too long. And then there was the message. "Please help my mummy." That meant the person who sent it was a child. Jamin zoomed in on the corner of the photo again, the tiny hand resting on the blanket. A child's hand. His mind raced with questions. Who was that child? Why was she with Hannah? And why would a little girl be the one asking for help? The car suddenly slowed. "Boss, we're here," the driver said. Jamin looked out the window. In front of them stood an old apartment building, dimly lit and quiet. Not the kind of place Hannah should have been living in. Without waiting, Jamin opened the car door and stepped out. Somewhere inside that building, the woman he had been searching for 5 years was fighting for her life, and he was about to find out the truth she had been hiding. The old apartment building was quiet. Too quiet. The hallway lights flickered weakly as Jamin walked down the narrow corridor. His footsteps echoed softly against the worn-out floor. Behind him, 2 of his men followed, but they kept their distance. They could sense this moment was personal. Jamin stopped in front of a small door at the end of the hallway. The number on it matched the address from the phone signal. For a second, he simply stood there. 5 years of questions, 5 years of anger, 5 years of wondering why Hannah had disappeared without a word. All of it waited behind that door. He raised his hand and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Inside the apartment, Mina jumped at the sudden sound. She had been sitting beside the bed, holding her mother's hand. Her eyes widened. Someone was at the door. The little girl slowly climbed off the bed and walked toward it. Her heart was beating fast. Maybe it was the person she had sent the message to. "Hello," Mina called softly. Outside, Jamin heard the small voice. He froze. A child. His expression hardened slightly with confusion. The door lock clicked. Then the door slowly opened. Standing there was a tiny girl with messy hair and wide, curious eyes. She looked no older than 6. She studied the tall man standing in front of her. Behind him were several men dressed in dark suits. To Mina, they looked important. "Did you get my message?" she asked nervously. Jamin stared at her. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Something about the girl felt strangely familiar. Her eyes, her small face. But before he could say anything, Mina grabbed his hand suddenly. "Please come quickly," she said urgently. "My mummy is very sick." She pulled him gently toward the bedroom. Jamin followed without resistance. The moment he stepped inside the room, his heart stopped. Hannah lay on the bed exactly like in the photo. Pale, weak, barely conscious. The years had changed her, but there was no doubt. It was her. "Hannah," he said quietly. Her eyes slowly opened. For a second, she seemed confused. Then she saw him. Shock filled her face. Tears formed instantly in her eyes. "Jamin," she whispered. The room fell silent. But Jamin barely noticed anything else. Because standing beside the bed, holding Hana's hand, was the little girl. And as he looked at her again, he noticed something that made his chest tighten. The child had his eyes. For several seconds, no one spoke. The air in the small bedroom felt heavy. Jamin stood beside the bed, staring at Hana, as if he were afraid she might disappear again if he blinked. "Hana," he said again, his voice quieter this time. Her weak smile trembled. "I didn't think you would come," she whispered. Before he could respond, the little girl tugged gently on his sleeve. "Are you the doctor?" Mina asked. Jamin looked down at her. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. "No," he replied softly. "Then, are you here to help my mummy?" The innocent question tightened something in his chest. "Yes," he said firmly. "I'm here to help her." Mina seemed relieved and returned to the bed, holding her mother's hand again. Jamin pulled a chair closer and sat beside Hana. His eyes searched her face. "Why did you disappear?" he asked quietly. The question carried 5 years of pain. Hana looked away. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she slowly turned her gaze toward the little girl sitting beside her. "Mina," she said gently. "Yes, Mummy?" "Sweetheart, can you go bring the glass of water from the kitchen?" Mina nodded and quickly ran out of the room. As soon as the small footsteps disappeared, Hana closed her eyes for a moment. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," she said weakly. Jamin frowned. "Then why?" Her voice trembled. "Because of your enemies." Jamin's expression hardened. "You think I couldn't protect you?" "I know you could," Hana replied softly. "But I couldn't risk your life, or the life of the child I was carrying." Jamin froze. "The child?" Hana slowly turned her eyes toward the doorway where Mina had disappeared. "I found out I was pregnant shortly after I left," she whispered. The word seemed to echo in Jamin's mind. Pregnant. He looked toward the hallway, toward the small girl who had opened the door. 5 years ago, your rivals were searching for any weakness you had," Hana continued. "If they knew about the baby, they would have used her against you." "So you disappeared," Jamin said slowly. Tears slid down Hana's face. "I thought it was the only way to keep her safe." Jamin stood up abruptly and walked toward the doorway. Mina was returning with the glass of water, holding it carefully with both hands. She stopped when she saw him looking at her. "What?" she asked innocently. Jamin stared at the child, at her eyes, at the small features that now made perfect sense. A realization struck him like lightning. The little girl who had sent that message, the little girl who asked him to help her mother, was his daughter. The room felt different now. Not louder, not brighter, but heavier, in a way that carried truth. Mina stood in the doorway holding the glass of water, watching the tall man's expression change slowly. She didn't understand why he was staring at her like that. Jamin looked at her again. Really looked. The shape of her eyes, the way she held the glass carefully with both hands, the quiet strength in her small face. It was undeniable. He turned back toward Hana. "You never told me," he said, his voice low. Hana struggled to sit up slightly. "I wanted to," she whispered, "but I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid your enemies would find out." Jamin clenched his jaw. His enemies had always searched for weakness, and a child would have been the greatest one. He walked slowly toward Mina and crouched down in front of her, so they were at eye level. The room became silent. Mina tilted her head. "Are you going to help Mommy?" she asked softly. Jamin's expression softened for the first time in years. "Yes," he said. "Good," Mina replied with a small smile. "Mommy needs to get better so she can smile again." Those simple words hit him harder than any threat ever had. He looked at Hannah once more. "I will get the best doctors," he said firmly. "Money won't be an issue. Security won't be an issue. No one will touch this building." His men outside had already begun securing the area. Within minutes, medical specialists were on their way. For the first time in 5 years, Hannah allowed herself to relax slightly. But the emotional tension in the room had not disappeared. Jamin stood up and walked to the window. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had built an empire on control. But right now, control wasn't what mattered. Mina walked over and gently grabbed his hand again. "Thank you," she said. He looked down at her. She didn't know the truth yet. She didn't know who he was to her, but she trusted him. That trust felt heavier than any responsibility he had ever carried. Hannah watched the scene with tears in her eyes. She had spent 5 years protecting her daughter alone. Now, the man she once loved stood between them and the world. Outside, black cars surrounded the building. Inside, a new chapter quietly began. Jamin turned back toward Hannah. "This time," he said firmly, "you don't disappear." Hannah nodded weakly, for the first time in years. The past was no longer running from them. It had finally caught up, and everything had truly changed. The doctors arrived before sunrise. With Jamin's connections, Hannah received the best treatment the city could offer. The sickness that once felt impossible to fight slowly began to improve. Mina stayed close to her mother the entire time, and this time, she was not alone. Jamin made one thing very clear to everyone around him. No one touches this family. No one threatens them, not anymore. Days later, Hannah opened her eyes to see Mina sleeping peacefully on the chair beside her bed, and Jamin standing quietly near the window, watching over them. For the first time in years, the room felt safe. Hannah looked at him and whispered, "Thank you for coming." Jamin walked closer. "I should have never let you leave alone," he replied softly. Mina woke up and smiled when she saw them both together. She didn't understand everything yet, but she understood one thing. Her message for help didn't just save her mother. It brought her family back together. And sometimes, one small act of courage from a 6-year-old child can change 3 lives forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more emotional and powerful stories like this. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you for spending your time here today. Until the next story, stay safe, stay kind, and keep believing that even the smallest voice can make the biggest difference.